Joined now by Shannon Griffith from Hoosier Tailgate. Talk some football, man. We haven't talked football hardly, since last week.
A lot of things happen in a week.
Yeah, the funny thing is, if you go to thehoosier.com, there's a piece up from Adam Gorney, the national guy and the national recruiting director for football, and he ranks some of all the big hires: Michigan, Alabama, Arizona, et cetera. And I got to give him credit. He opens up his review, or whatever you want to call it, on Indiana, and it says, I Googled new Indiana coach Curt Cignetti. He wins. Cignetti is 119-35 as a coach, but this isn't Indiana University of Pennsylvania. Elon or James Madison, although he did a phenomenal job at all those stops and put the Dukes in the national conversation this year. But this job at Indiana might be as close to impossible as there is in Power 5 football, which we'll get back to that, which I just don't understand. Yeah. The Hoosiers lost a lot of players to the transfer portal, but one wonders whether that's necessarily a bad thing given their record in recent years. Cignetti also smartly used the portal to bring in some fresh blood, much of it from his James Madison team, so that will be something to watch. Here's a worrisome fact, though. From 2008 to 2023, not counting the COVID year, Indiana has one winning season, and the Big Ten is getting much, much, much more challenging. But he gives up a grade of A-. Yeah, that wasn't a lot that we didn't already know, to be honest with you.
Well, I always like when they selectively throw out some of the best years in in the history. So we're going to exclude the COVID year because that doesn't count.
Yeah. Well, it obviously made a difference, but that's still,
they played the games.
Last year's team would not have had the success that they had in the COVID year.
Mm-hmm.
The COVID year team was badass.
Well, yeah,
they had the pieces in place.
Yeah, one of them just played in the national championship game
and was a Heisman runner-up.
That's right.
So there's just that, and 3 of the coaches on that staff were on the staff of the team that played in the national championship and are now at Alabama.
Yep.
So,
yeah, I mean,
actually,
there's 4.
There's if not 5.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know who all has gone with him from Washington that was Indiana connected. But Kane Womack, like we talked before, from South Alabama, joined him. And
and there's a guy that was, and I forget his name, but was the director of recruiting at Georgia that I think was a former Indiana football player.
Yeah.
Who was either interviewed for the position, the same position at Alabama.
Yeah, and that's you start getting into these off the field personnel, senior analysis and GM football and recruiting analysis and things of that nature. It gets a little mind boggling. And there's actually a team out there, and I don't know who it is, but they've actually got a player personnel for offense, player personnel for defense. And their responsibility is to evaluate the depth of that side of the football, and then also look and where they could pick up guys in the portal and all those type of things. I mean, it's really gotten to the point where they're going to start having algorithms and, stats that, make a decision on whether you recruit a guy or not. It's gotten to that point.
Matt Merrick is the latest recruit for Indiana. Big 6'4", 285-pounder from the same high school as former Indiana offensive lineman Dan Feeney.
Yep.
Little note there. On film, he has quick feet and overpowers the defense, which that's something you like to hear.
Well, when you get those offensive linemen, especially the big kids that can move, and it's mostly laterally, left to right. Those kids that have that, Dan Feeney had it, of course. That's why, NFL guy. And he comes from a good school, a good high school football program up there in Chicagoland. And when you can get some of those kids from top tiered programs, you're getting a well-coached, well-tooled student athlete. And that's the key component to it all. And those are the type of guys like you get, Bob Bopsted's stable, and he has a chance to work with them for a year or two. And then they, come on the scene and they're just ready to go and they're really good. So I'm sure they like to take about 7 or 8 of those type of guys.
Yeah. And the good thing is Indiana's got a little bit of a head start, though, in the offensive line. As far as not having to start from scratch, they got some, a couple of guys back, a couple of guys in the portal. Just kind of a hodgepodge, but that's okay. If you get the guys you want and the guys who you feel will buy in, that's as important as anything. It's as important as getting someone who might be a tick higher rated but doesn't buy in. You've got to have buy-in from everybody. And if you have that, then you have a team on the same page. And if you have a team on the same page, well, that team is just going to be a little more, use the word dangerous, but dangerous meaning potentially to be more successful than not.
Right. Yeah, and that was kind of some of the things that in my interview with Brian Haynes that played last night, he kind of talked about the same component of, getting that message from the top down and then making sure that each position group has that same message. And then that way you've got all cylinders working together. And when you have that, you've got a team that's a very bona fide, tough nails football team with no, position group kind of on their own. They're all working in unison. And I think that's one thing that, Coach Cignetti has done at every place that he's been is, the things behind the scenes, not necessarily the things that people see on Saturday afternoons. It's the behind the scenes things that they do to create that successful team environment.
Yeah, and that's something that no disrespect to Tom Allen, because he was all about team. He was all about having, but there has to be success, because if you're not successful, there's going to be fractures in that quote unquote team.
Yes.
Because without success, that fracture comes from doubt. That fracture comes from disappointment. That fracture comes from a lot of different areas of people not playing, thinking they should be playing, especially when you're not winning.
Yeah.
You're like, well, that ain't working. So there's just so many areas of fracture when you don't win. I don't care how hard you try to maintain this team concept. There has to be a recipe of winning, and Tom did not have the winning recipe, and that was the problem during that time, in my opinion.
No, yeah, and you're right. You gotta the kids got to have the reward. for the hard work and the things that you do behind the scenes. And when those things don't come to fruition, there's only so much time you have until that doubt creeps into the minds of those that are there. And then all of a sudden, like you said, you've got, well, I don't know why that kid's playing. I'm better than him. And you start getting the fractures, like you said, amongst the team. And it's all because you don't have success. And when you have a season like IU had last year, where you had 5 or 6 games that were, 6 points or less, those are even 10 times as worse than getting beat by 40, because that frustration is a lot bigger because it was right there. And then that's when you really start getting the doubt of why things aren't getting over the hill.
And more on Indiana's latest pickup of Matt Merrick, the 2025 kid. If I could get out of that, daggone it.
Computers don't always work the way you want.
Stupid ad blocker.
Yeah.
Thanks for the ad blocker, but you're also blocking everything else. But oh well, we'll skip that for now. But that's just an area that shows that they're still going to develop guys.
Oh yeah,
and I think that's been an area where Indiana has missed. There was no development going on really in a lot of areas. They're fortunate to hang on to Bob Bostad. That was probably an area where they weren't having the problem, but he wasn't in the position long enough for that fruit to come to fruition.
Well, I think you saw some of the evidence of Coach Bobstad's ability with everything on the field that he was able to accomplish there as the season went on. And I think it was a huge retain by Coach Signetti because of Coach Bobstad's, years of college football experiences, his success at Wisconsin. I think there's a meeting of the minds of what it takes in terms of, like you said, developing players. You can't just always be portal. You have to have those freshmen that become sophomores and juniors and seniors in your team, because that ultimately is what creates the depth for you. And I think Bobstad does that very, very well with his offensive linemen and development. So I think that was the key component for why Coach Signetti actually kept Bobstad with him in the program.
Yeah, he was the only coach retained, and it shows that says a lot right there. That of the respect that he has for Bob Bostad, who has those Wisconsin roots. And if you know anything about Wisconsin football from even recent times, man, everything that their success started and ended from the offensive line. They grow them big up there, and they train them big up there.
Oh yeah, Wisconsin. There's a storied history there with the big kids, not just, that get to go to, University of Wisconsin. They all end up in the Wisconsin system somewhere. And then down there through that Chicagoland area in the suburbs where this Warwick kid came from. And that's a fruitful recruiting grounds for a lot of schools. And in Indiana, they used to have a pretty good hold in that area with getting kids out of. So it's good to see them get a kid out of that area at that prominent, school. Now, there is a long time between now and next December that this young man, has to weather the storm of potential other suitors per se. So, it's nice that they get a kid that of that caliber now, but there's a long nurturing process that has to occur between now and next December. That's the issue that you have in college football right now is getting them to that point.
And Coach Casignetti is this will be the busiest year of his tenure at IU, probably, because he has to come in, get everything in order, go through this spring, heading toward this spring practice, which is not that far away, by the way, and start getting things in order and lining up a depth chart. And this is not going to be a depth chart that contains a quarterback mystery, fortunately. But it's going to be, what is going to be interesting to watch for me is the race at backup for quarterback. Everyone thinks that Taven Jackson is the heir apparent to that number 2 spot. And I don't agree. I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. I'm not sure that Alberto Mendoza will be ready for. He probably can't challenge for that because he's not going to be a mid-season enrollee. So that's going to put him far further behind. But someone who is going to be a mid-season enrollee is Tyler Cherry from the same high school that Taven went to. And I think that he can challenge him for that number 2 spot.
Well, there's no question that room as a whole is going to be a very competitive room. And I'm anxious to see how Tino Sinceri, handles that room, because sometimes a change in a quarterback coach is the lights go off for the kid that's, the one that you think you should be the guy. And all of a sudden a new coach comes in and the lights go off for that kid. And all of a sudden they become who they should become. So with like Taven, in that regard, but you're correct. I think Tyler Cherry is going to be a kid that will get a lot of opportunity in the spring. They've got to see what they have at that position. The other bad thing about the portal is there's another portal that comes open at the end of spring there, right in the early part of May. And you could see some of these guys, especially in that quarterback room, that if they're not going to be where they think they should be, they may look to, greener pasture somewhere else, especially at that position. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic and competitive room. And we're going to find out pretty quickly here because March is right around the corner.